Dolph Ziggler officially arrived in TNA, and the big question is this a game changer? Now, I think it's really important to look at this from multiple different aspects, because what TNA did last night was something that I feel like Scott D'Amore has not necessarily done a lot of in the last several years, with Anthem owning TNA, or Impact as it was formerly known. So here's the thing, right? Scott D'Amore, for the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, I think it's a very focused show, right? You're going to get good matches. You're going to get good storylines. You're going to get consistency. And your intelligence is not going to be insulted. But the thing that was always interesting to me with TNA, or Impact Wrestling, was it wasn't like there was a lot of big moments that went viral within the company. And I feel like in wrestling today, WWE and AEW are always creating big moments, big surprises, big debuts, big moments in matches. They did something with Dolph Ziggler that I feel will live on for a very long time, which was the big moment of his debut. He super kicked Moose after Moose won the world championship. He delivered a zigzag, and then he celebrated with the crowd. And the absolute beauty of this was, the crowd was only 1,500 people, maybe a little bit more, give or take, but the thing is, the crowd was electric for this, and when he's celebrating with the crowd, I thought the shot was beautiful. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, here's a little glimpse of it, but it's him with the crowd. Everybody's going crazy. Holy shit. It was the proper way to end a very good pay-per-view, especially at a time where TNA is trying to show people this is a new era. They've rebranded and all that good stuff, but this was a moment. Now, the thing is, I think it's really important to discuss long-term where Nick Nemeth stands with TNA, because I do have a few reservations. And the biggest one is one that I hate to admit, but it kind of reminds me of the Trinity Fatu situation. Let me explain. Trinity Fatu, aka Naomi, was done with WWE. And instead of going to AEW and just being another person on their roster, she went to TNA and was given the keys to the company. But now here we are. Trinity's leaving TNA, and she's going back to WWE. And the amount of time that Naomi the amount of time that she stayed with TNA or Impact Wrestling, she was given the keys to the kingdom. She was the leader of the women's division. She was the champion of the women's division. She was always highlighted and put in a great spotlight, which I thought was the right call. And then what was really funny is last night during Hard to Kill, I've seen a lot of people have some weird little take that Naomi dug TNA out of a hole, which, as much as I love Naomi and I love Trinity Fatu, and I was very excited to see her there, and I was very excited to see the way she was presented and to see the stuff that she's done there, I thought her run was incredible, and I thought it was the best way that you can leave WWE. It's not like Impact Wrestling was in a hole. Let's make that very clear. Impact Wrestling was developing a good TV show week over week, but the problem with Impact Wrestling will always be the discoverability of it. The notion that Impact Wrestling or TNA will always have this stigma that Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan ruined it. And it's unfortunate that there's a lot of wrestling fans who haven't watched this company in 7 years still think this company is the same company that it once was. And it's almost weird that people don't use common sense here. But when Anthem took over the company, there was a lot of changes to this company. And it wasn't always, great positive changes. But after the first year or two of acquiring Impact, you could really see a difference with the product and how it was ran before. This is not some obscure promotion. The reality is Impact Wrestling has been putting on good TV. The problem is not a lot of people see it. Now, some people were willing to see it, right? And that's why the TNA rebrand was so important, because there was a lot of people who were like, okay, hold on. This could actually be something. I'll buy the pay-per-view. And then there's the other people online who just genuinely don't want to even think about another potential wrestling company possibly growing, and they don't want to see that happen, which I think makes no sense. But the problem here is that I think there was a lot of people in the past who weren't willing to give TNA a chance. And Dolph Ziggler, if you were somebody who didn't watch the pay-per-view, Dolph Ziggler showing up and creating that moment that has now been seen millions of times on social media, yeah, I think it's fair to say people are more likely to give it a shot. And this is why it's so important that people understand Nick Nemeth is not using the Dolph Ziggler name. Nick Nemeth is not going to change TNA to the point where TNA gets a massive TV deal or a massive arena with 20,000 people. That's not what is expected here. And I think we got to talk about expectations because that's the most important thing. It's like Trinity. We knew that Impact would do well with Trinity because we've known for a long time that they've always done well by their women's division. That Knockouts division is consistently booked all of the time. So when Trinity walked in there, we weren't expecting Trinity to go and get them to the point where they're going to get 2 million viewers on TV or something like that. That's not what we were expecting. We were expecting Trinity to go in there and have great storylines, win great matches, have great matches, tell great stories, and at the end of the day, put a little bit of a spotlight on the company who may have not given it a chance. And what Naomi did was bring a little bit more credibility to TNA because the easy route after WWE was going to AEW. And the Dolph Ziggler situation is actually very similar. Now, the question is, how long does Dolph Ziggler stay in TNA? Because if TNA can keep Dolph Ziggler for a year or two, if they really make him a part of the show, championship reigns, big storylines, great matches. By the way, TNA, New Japan work together. So the beauty of that is that Dolph Ziggler could also continue this New Japan stuff, which also allows him to potentially go into the G1 Climax this year. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities, right? What Dolph Ziggler does to TNA is bring a little bit more credibility to the brand, right? Because again, the easy answer is you could go to AEW. But instead, he goes to TNA. And as long as they do what they did with Trinity in the sense of, hey, we're going to put you in big profile feuds, matches, all of these different things, if you replicate that, I think over time you will see that Dolph Ziggler, if he remains with the company, will ultimately grow the company, right? This is a little bit of a different approach for TNA. They cannot rely solely on one new signing. So they might bring in some talent, but overall they have to impress you with the television show, the writing, the production, presentation, and stuff like that. And I feel like what they did with Hard to Kill was kind of set a good expectation for people. Like, hey, we're going to have a little bit of something for everyone. We're going to focus on our tag team division. We're going to give you those crazy bangers of triple threat X division matches that are nostalgic, reminiscent of 2003 TNA. But also at the same time, too, we are going to have those really in-depth storylines and wrestling matches that maybe they're a little bit slower paced, but there's a story being told in the ring. And you saw that with Josh Alexander and Alex Hammerstone, right? So it's all about setting the right expectations. And I think Dolph Ziggler going into TNA does a lot of good for TNA. My only hope is that he stays in the company long enough where the company and Dolph Ziggler truly bring credibility back to the point where more people are willing to give him a chance and a bigger chance to grow. So this way they could also sign other potential free agents. Now, we are expecting new signings to pop up any minute with these new tapings that have been announced. So obviously it's a collective thing, but that's what I do like about TNA. It's in a way, it's kind of like, it's a breath of fresh air in a wrestling industry where it's dominated by money. And TNA obviously makes money. They have to be profitable to some degree, but also the cost of running TNA is very different than AEW and WWE because WWE and AEW do bigger venues and stuff like that. So this is a really cool thing. Would I call Dolph Ziggler a game changer? I think he's part of the game changing itself. I don't think there's one individual in TNA that will make up for TNA to completely just absolutely grind to the top. You know what I mean? I think it's a collective thing, and that's why it's important to have a really stacked tag team division, X division, women's division, all of these different divisions. Collectively, it has to be good. But I think this highlighted them in a certain way where a lot of people who may have not spent the $40 were like, hey, I'm giving this a chance. And based on the results of my polls, it was very overwhelmingly high of praise. There was a lot of people who enjoyed it. So that's always a good thing. It's not for everybody. And if you're not one of those people who enjoy it, that's completely fine. But it's nice to know that there's a third company making waves. Is it on the level of AEW and WWE? No. Is it supposed to be? No. Could it get there one day? I do think eventually it could. I think it will take a lot of work, but I don't necessarily see it as a failure if they don't, because the wrestling industry currently needs a company like this. And I think it just makes AEW and WWE better. And I think actually AEW benefits the most out of this because AEW has always been focused on WWE. Now they have another company who's smaller, who's making waves. And it just kind of goes to show you that wrestling is better when every company is thriving. And look, WWE and AEW, they could go up and down, up and down. TNA could go up and down, up and down. But the more options you have, fans are always up, and that's one of the best parts about this.